Hello everyone. Just thought I would record a little video today. Hope that you are all doing okay with all the stuff that's going on. I'm just kind of trying to keep it in the day and just take one day at a time and stuff like that. But I have been kind of using the time to read a lot. And I thought I would just come on here and do a few reviews in case anyone's kind of wanting something to read and wanting any kind of good recommendations. I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks lately, and I just happened to have listened to a spate of like celebrity memoirs and things, so I thought I would just come on and chat about the books that I've been listening to, and see if you like the sound of any of them. So the first one that I wanted to talk about is by Julie Andrews, and it's called Home. And I listened to the sample of this first of all, and her voice is just so lovely. I thought I would get it, and I'm really glad I did. I reviewed this on Goodreads and gave it 5 stars. I just loved it, and I think it's because I listened to the audio version, and of course because she's such a fantastic actress, she just narrated it perfectly. It was just so well performed, and her voice was just lovely to listen to. And she's got 2 memoirs out. A recent one is called Homework, and I had read the reviews on it, and the reviews I thought weren't great, and a lot of people were saying that her first memoir, Home, was better. So I thought I would just read that. So Home is all about sort of her childhood, and up until kind of the early years of her filmmaking, and then I think Homework is apparently more about sort of her movie life, and it was crazy just to read about her childhood and how she was performing from such a young age, and how that her mother had her on stage performing for such a young age, and sort of you were kind of thinking, was she sort of, in a really privileged position where she was just kind of thrown into this, but actually, she didn't have an easy childhood at all, and her stepfather leaves a lot to be desired, and then there was other kind of complications with her own father, and it sounded as if as well that her mother was kind of really pushing her to do all this performance, and that it seemed as though she was actually the sort of main breadwinner for the family at a very young age. And the thing that also comes across about her is that when you read a lot of these celebrity memoirs, a lot of it is kind of rock and roll and drink and drugs and stuff, and certainly not the case. For Julie Andrews, she was just such a hard working person, and it was early nights and then getting up for work the next day, and you can tell she was just such a lovely person and so nice to everyone, which is probably why she's done so well in her career. But yeah, it was very honest, and she went into a lot of difficulties that happened in her childhood, and then she was talking all about living through World War II, as a youngster and stuff like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed that book. The next book I want to talk about is by Demi Moore, and it's called Inside Out. And this one I didn't enjoy as much. I was engrossed in it, and I did sort of stick it through to the very end, and but I felt that it was off to a really slow start, and I felt that the section about sort of her childhood was far too long, and it sounds awful to say, but she sort of came across as quite sort of whiny, and sort of like a real, a bit of a victim. And on the one hand, I can kind of understand that, because she had a really difficult relationship with her mother, and her mother did something really horrible to her, which has obviously kind of affected her mental health, but it had a really sort of depressing feel to it. But I'd imagine she probably found it very cathartic to write it. And she narrates it as well, and she narrates it beautifully. And she did talk a lot about, her roles in Ghost and About Last Night and Indecent Proposal, and I found all that really interesting. And then she talked all about her marriage to Bruce Willis and the divorce from Bruce Willis, and then her marriage to Ashton Kutcher, and then breaking up with him. And she's really honest and just goes into loads of detail about it all. And she talks a lot about she had a really, really bad eating disorder for years and years and years, and she talks a lot about that and about addiction and alcoholism, and kind of all those kind of issues, and she just leaves no holds barred. She just goes into everything, so she's very honest. The next one I want to talk about is by Moby, and I read two of his. I read Porcelain, and then I read Then It Fell Apart. When I say read, I mean listen to. These were both audio as well, and he narrated them both as well, and I really liked his narration. I thought it was really soothing and gentle, but I know other people who've listened to it and have found it sort of really monotone, so but I think it really just depends on your own preferences, doesn't it? But I kind of read these the wrong way around by accident. I read Then It Fell Apart first of all, and that was his second memoir, and then I loved it so much that I went and read Porcelain, and that was his first memoir, and I enjoyed them both equally. Porcelain was more about his childhood, and his DJing and his music passion for music, and him sort of getting into the music industry, and then right up until when he sort of got signed. So it was kind of all before his fame. And then It Fell Apart is kind of after he got famous, after he'd made loads of money. He's living in this fantastic luxury penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, and his addiction and alcoholism is off the roof, and he's miserable. And it's actually it actually starts off with him describing a suicide attempt, and so it's quite raw. So both books feel very different. His first book, he wasn't sort of drinking or using drugs. He was actually really religious, and he was just really obsessed with music and putting all his energy into it, and then did really well. And then when he sort of got into that sort of celebrity world and got into drugs and drink, it was just really empty and depressed. So it's sort of all about his addiction issues, and it was just really, really honest. And I loved it. I gave them both 5 stars. And then the next two that I read were by Brett Anderson of Swede, and the first one was called Coal Black Mornings, and the second one was called Afternoons with the Blinds Drawn. And again, I kind of read these two back to front by accident. I read Afternoons with the Blinds Drawn first, and that was his second memoir, and I enjoyed it so much I went and listened to Coal Black Mornings, which was his first memoir, and again he narrated both of them, and his voice was sort of lovely and gentle and soothing, although you could tell that by the end of the book he was getting really tired. He kind of kept taking deep breaths and stuff like that, but it was I really enjoyed it. Coal Black Mornings was more about his upbringing and his teenage life and his relationship with Your Woman Out of Elastica, Justine, and how much she kind of influenced him, and them kind of getting started in Swede, and it was sort of right up until they got signed. And then his second book, Afternoons with the Blinds Drawn, was kind of reflecting back on, you know, his time when Suede were massive. And I think it always, after he had written the first memoir, apparently he said he would never write another one. And then he did, and he didn't want the second memoir to be the same as every other celebrity memoir, just a tale of drink and drugs and things, and name dropping, and it wasn't that. It was more about talking about the relationships between, you know, him and the other band members. One's leaving, one's joining, and it kind of, he seemed very reflective, and it was kind of a lot of hindsight and him sort of thinking, oh, I should have done this better, or I shouldn't have acted like that, or it seemed quite sort of a bit, not like a confessional, but sort of just a reflection on the time that he had in the band. And also he talked a lot about the image that was kind of put on him by the press, and how he kind of went along with that and how he shouldn't have. So he talks a lot about his image. And then he talked a lot about sort of the, you know, creative process of kind of making music and making songs and how the songs came about and all that kind of stuff. So definitely not a typical celebrity memoir, and you can tell he's very, very intelligent and very articulate. So it was really interesting to read, and I think it would be interesting for anyone who, you know, who just wasn't necessarily a fan of Suede. I think they would, if they enjoy reading, they would, you know, enjoy reading his words. So it's just a few of the books that I've been listening to last month, and yeah, I hope you're all doing okay at the moment, and just kind of I don't know, just taking this all a day at a time, and that's all from me. Over and out.